Israel just engaged in a massive terrorist attack in Lebanon, targeting their civilian population. Israel planted explosive devices in pagers and two-way radios in Lebanon and now exploding them indiscriminately. Zionist propagandists are pretending that Israel engaged in a targeted attack against Hezbollah. In reality, the people who were killed was children, doctors, nurses, and ordinary people who was victims of Israeli terrorism. And Israel is not done with their terrorist activities. There is a second wave of Israeli terrorist attacks that is blowing up pagers and walkie-talkies. There are now reports of fires breaking out and vehicles exploding. When will the West stop enabling Israeli terrorism? Zionists are so sick in the head, they are seeing these massive terrorist attacks, and they are openly cheering this on.
Beep, beep. Beep, beep.
Meanwhile, the corporate media and the ADL will smear you as anti-Semitic if you believe these terrorists are the bad guys. These are elected officials cheering on civilians being blown up in grocery stores. The Israeli terrorists are enabled because after their genocide in Gaza, they realize they can get away with anything they want. No matter where you are on the political spectrum, if you are not speaking out against this, you are a fool. Now that we know that the ruling class has this technology, how long until they use this against the dissidents of Zionism back at home? Donald Trump is decrying the fact that the Israeli lobby doesn't have more power over the American people.
Most powerful lobby in this country by far was Israel and Jewish people. Today, it's almost like, what happened? What happened? What happened to Schumer? What happened to all these people? Schumer's like a Palestinian, right? It's a Palestinian. It's amazing. If you go back 15 years or even less, the strongest lobby in that sense in the United States was Israel. You couldn't say a thing about Israel, Christian or Jew. You couldn't say anything about today. It's like under siege. And then you see Schumer, who's become a Palestinian, as far as I'm concerned. I mean, he's actually become like a Hamas agent. You know, 15 years ago, Israel was the strongest lobby, if you want to use the word lobby, had the strongest representation of people like this. But the strongest there was, if you said something about a Jewish person or something about Israel that was bad, you were out of politics. You said something about Israel that was bad, it was like, today, you have to fight. We all have to fight for Israel.
Whatever happened to America first? The MAGA movement is filled with pathetic Christian Zionists who care more about fighting for Israel than they do for Americans. MAGA, for example, has no problem with Israel providing health care for their people. But if you imply we should do the same thing in America, they will call you a filthy communist. MAGA claims they support free speech. Meanwhile, they support canceling Americans who are too critical of the foreign policy of the genocidal state of Israel. Another election where our choice is essentially Zionists who like gay people and Zionists who don't like gay people. What a democracy that we live in. Over and over again, Trump and his group of MAGA traitors made it clear what their intentions are if Donald Trump ever wins the presidency again.
We're going to take back our country and we're going to make Israel great again.
He actually said it. He said the thing, my friends. We're going to make Israel great again. That's what he said. In a conference where Donald Trump, it was a big anti-Semitism conference that they was attending. And in this conference, the whole point of it was to help manufacture consent for the push of censoring Americans. Meanwhile, you have people that still pretend that Trump is an anti-establishment fighter. This is why I don't have any respect for people like Candace Owens, Tucker Carlson and all these people who claim they are waging war on Zionism, as they support Donald Trump, you guys see the grift, which is literally doing something that is contradictory to what your stated values are. How can anyone say they can be against the war machine when you're supporting someone who's willing to defend Israel, who wants to start a regional war for a greater Israel? So there are going to be a lot of people disappointed in the Trump administration, which I want the pendulum to swing back and forth. So I don't want to ever see anyone any party have two terms. That plus the Biden persecution of black socialists. These are reasons why, if I had to pick, I want Trump to win, because the Biden administration, Kamala, is going after black dissidents, anyone to criticize the Ukraine war. Things are getting pretty desperate. And plus, we've seen with Bill Clinton, Barack Obama, George Bush, the worst thing that could happen is allowing one wing of the capitalist establishment gain momentum. We need that pendulum to swing back and forth as much as possible. Because if Donald Trump get elected, the same thing that will happen to many people who thought Democrats was on their side, all these fake MAGA people will realize that Donald Trump is here to do the bidding of Israel. Which is why Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson, none of these people have credibility with me supporting this guy. Like, this is the guy that they support while pretending to be part of some sort of anti-establishment coalition.
As to Jewish Americans is this: with your vote, I will be your defender, your protector, and I will be the best friend Jewish Americans have ever had in the White House.
And the corporate media is melting down because Donald Trump there was a point in his press conference where he was blaming Jewish people if he loses this election, because apparently Donald Trump and Republicans gets around 25 to 30% of the Jewish vote. Majority of the Jewish vote goes to Democrats. So you have the Jewish Americans who is not even the driving force of MAGA, and not even the driving force of Trump's diehard support for Israel. Because based on those numbers, doesn't it make more sense for the Democratic Party to be more diehard Israel? But no, Donald Trump is, even though they already get 25, 30% of the support of the Jewish population, which explains and demonstrates what I've been saying. Christian Zionism is the number one driver of the United States support towards Israel, which is why it's always weird when people make it about some sort of religious struggle. You have evangelical Christians who team up with Zionist Jewish people, but the evangelical Christians, their support outweighs the Jewish community by 20 times. And now this is Donald Trump tap dancing and performing for his Zionist masters.
You know that. Thank you. But in all fairness, I already am. I think I already am. I don't have to think. In fact, I already am. I am the best defender you've had as president by far. I think there'd be no question. Miriam mentioned 4 or 5 of the things. Those each individual thing. Oh, her husband would drive me crazy. You have to.
You know who he's talking about? For all the MAGA clowns who believe this guy is anti-establishment, you know who he's talking about? He's talking about Sheldon Adelson, the billionaire Zionist mega donor who gave Donald Trump $100 million to sell you out. He didn't need the money. The money helps. The money ensures the loyalty because he's been a Zionist scumbag. But he's praising Sheldon Adelson. And look at the flags he's standing behind. You see more of the Israeli flag than you do of the American flag. These are the people who have a flag fetish. Meanwhile, they fly the flag of an apartheid state because that's how much they love colonialism. They love colonialism and apartheid so much that they're willing to fly the flag of one of the last remaining apartheid states, the most brutal genocidal apartheid state, just because the sense of solidarity they have with them.
Oh, Her husband would drive me crazy. You have to do this. You have to do that. You don't know what I had to put up with. She was like the calming influence. I said, Sheldon, I can't do that. It's too much. He said, no. And every time I got something, he'd immediately start with something else, right? He'd get something, always fighting for Israel and the Jewish people. But, I had such great respect for him. It's true, though. She had to sometimes tell him, calm down. You just had a big victory. Let's celebrate. No, we have to immediately start. Let's see if we can do Golan Heights. How about Golan Heights? They've been trying to get it for 72 years. I got it done in about 15 minutes, okay? So.
Bragging about everything he did for Israel, like helping them seize Golan Heights, as he explained here.
Even Sheldon couldn't believe that one, I'll tell you. Even Sheldon couldn't believe that one. He said, we just got Golan Heights. They didn't even ask for it. I actually gave you that one. You didn't ask for it, but I thought it was important. Ground zero for the outbreak of the anti-Jewish hate under Kamala Harris.
Like, he's literally saying it. Like, here's the part of it again.
And we're going to make Israel great again.
Now you guys know why RFK Jr. endorsed Donald Trump now? You have the biggest idiots, the Russell Brand types. I wonder if I can find it, because I told him, I don't know if I can find it. It was a while ago. Where he was like, what are your thoughts about the RFK Jr. Trump coalition? They have the establishment shaking in their boots. You mean the Sheldon Adelson establishment? This is another election, like I said in my hotspot, where the choice is, do you want the Zionists who like gay people or the Zionists who don't like gay people? There's one team who puts gender ideology, one who don't like gender ideology. That's the only difference between these parties. And that's why you got progressives that want to support genocide. They want to support genocide because they just love gender ideology that much. That's the only explanation. Gaza was flattened. The worst administration of all time happened under Kamala Harris, a Democrat, but they wanted to support a Democrat and pretend they're the lesser two evil wives just because of gender ideology. You guys know I support freedom of expression, but that's just the reality. And the people on the right, they support Donald Trump because he opposed gender ideology. Do you guys understand how deeply unserious the American people are being right now? Which is why I decry the culture war. We are backing traitors, people who literally give speeches behind flags of other countries, who plan to embroil us into never-ending conflict because of gender ideology and the culture war. That's how people are making their political decisions. And if you push one of these progressive fake leftists, like the quote-unquote leftist mafia, they would never say that. But that's literally the way it is. They're okay with violent imperialism. They're okay with the Biden administration trying to lock up socialists in prison for 15 years. They're okay with the expansion of cop cities because they want to protect gender ideology. The ruling class really got you motherfuckers fighting their battles and voting against their interests over culture wars. Poor white people advocating for capitalists because they're scared that black and brown people will get one small slice of the pie. People still never explain to me why white poor people are so agitly against Marxism and socialism. Why they despise our politics, and my politics is essentially advocating they get health care. I want them to get health care. I want them to pay low amount of rent, and they view us as the enemy. Why? Because the culture war. That's it. That's why I don't have tolerance and I don't push it. I don't play it. I don't cover it. They're like, Nick, what are your opinions on trans people in sports? Don't give a fuck. Like, that's not, as someone who actually care about revolution and building class consciousness, that is a distraction used by the ruling class. We are a country of at least 350 million people. 350 million people, with people that come from all over the world, all different kind of cultures, and you think we're all gonna agree on one? You all think we're gonna agree on issues
of homosexuality, abortion. That shit not politics. Politics is the relation between labor, capital, the power between the government and what we have, the power of the people versus the power of the government, the authority that the government has, the actions that going on in the foreign policy regime, economic. These are policies. Politics. They got even talk. I don't even consider the culture war politics. But if you look at the average Trump supporter page, that's all they talk about. And to be honest, I may be wrong here, but I think the right played the culture war more than the left. I know I'm biased, but it's the right wingers. It's the people who claim they're fighting establishment that their main focus is on gender ideology. In my experience, guys, the queers, the homosexuals, the gay people, like the people we know in our community, they mostly just chilling, bro. That's just my opinion. They just be chilling, and then right wingers go after them. They like, look at what this crazy queer person say on their social media, and then they get triggered over what some other motherfuckers say. So it's just my personal opinion that it's the right wing that is pushing the culture war in order to distract from the fact that the capitalist class, the J.D. Vance, he was a venture capitalist. J.D. Vance is literally a venture capitalist. So he pushed the culture war. So his dumb, poor white following don't realize that J.D. Vance support policies that rip them the fuck off. J.D. Vance, he supports our taxpayer money going to Israel to provide them health care. But if you were to advocate for health care for Americans, they will call you a communist. They will call you a radical. And these are the same people who want Americans to hate China. China, who provides health care to their people, where the average rent is $499 in China. The average salary is $49,000 on a $499 rent. They make our society look like the garbage that it is. They expose the West as true barbarians. As they eliminate poverty, Americans just accept that poverty is just a simple reality that we have to deal with. As we have harsh police state, rugged authoritarian policies aimed at the working class that is meant to lock us up and drive us into debt. They have a lax, laissez-faire, libertarian ideology when it comes to the capitalist ruling class. Kamala Harris being an example of that. She refused to prosecute Steve Mnuchin for bank fraud during the financial crisis. So when it comes to prosecuting the capitalist class, they offer leniency, they offer defund the police, they offer abolition when it comes for that. But when it comes for the billionaire class, when it comes for the working class, they all for harsh authoritarian law and order. Meanwhile, China has the exact opposite. They have about 4 times more than us, more people than us, 1.5 billion people, but they have less people in prison. Despite having less people in prison, they still prosecute their billionaires. They execute their billionaires. The West can't have a competitor with a completely different ideology when it comes to central planning, distributing wealth, the relationship between the proletariat and the capitalist class, where the proletariat dominates the capitalist class. They can't have any example of any system that undermines the rugged individualism of capitalism. Big shout out to my boy James Starks. I see you, bro, in the chat. The 2 super stickers. I appreciate you. Big shout out to James Starks. He's the OG. He's the homie. And now that China is continuing to rise, as they advocate for de-dollarization, they get more and more countries on board for de-dollarization. As they continue to dominate the market and grow and provide an alternative to our system, we have the capitalist class that is in full panic. And now they're reverting to what they always do when they see a competitor, when they view that their power is under threat. It's time for war. Now, this is the main story. This is the headline. We have our guest, Alex Vitale, author of End of Policing. We had him on the RBN quite a while ago. You guys know I'm an abolitionist. I co-found 10 Demands. Alex Vitale is a great author and educator to discuss this police state that we're talking about. We got cop cities forming all over the country. Police killings more deadlier than ever. And as we have our capitalist class waging war against us, the ruling class wants to convince you that China is your enemy. Do you guys feel like China is your enemy? And the ruling class wants to imprison us. They want to lock us up. Hillary Clinton says she wants to imprison us for putting propaganda, advocating for peace. I will never, ever apologize. I need people on the left to understand this. I need my Green Party brothers and sisters to understand this. I need everyone to understand this. China is not our enemy. Putin is not our enemy. Assad is not our enemy. Maduro is not our enemy. The people resisting United States imperialism is not our enemy. The enemy is the disgusting ruling class that has plunged the global working class into darkness, that rob us of our resources so they can continue their indiscriminate pillaging of the planet. So there's no false equivalency between these people ever. We have a ruling class that wants us to be in a nonstop state of war. For the people who are only listening, I have the headline up. Here's the headline I'm reacting to. United States Navy is planning for a possible war by 2027 when China expects it will be ready to invade Taiwan, U.S. Admiral said. So this is, and this headline is everywhere. You got neocons celebrating. Navy prepares for China conflict with newly announced strategy. They have this big plan to start war with China in the next few years, and that sounds extremely plausible because not only do we have Trump doing essentially promising everything to Zionists and essentially promising to be Benjamin Netanyahu's butt buddy, he also is pledging to the neocon class that he will be tough on China, that Kamala Harris is weak on China. And in the debate, I don't know if you guys saw the debate. I didn't have time to do like a reaction to it, but I saw the foreign policy part of it. It was essentially a competition between Kamala Harris and Donald Trump on who will be the most rabid anti-China maniac. You have the Dick Cheney Republicans siding with Kamala Harris. The DNC platform, Kamala Harris' speech talking about how we have the most lethal fighting force. She had a speech at the DNC convention where she essentially pledged that she would never seek peace, that she would never negotiate with China. She attacked Donald Trump for being weak on China and enabling China. This is the messaging that's coming from our ruling class.
Joining us now is Gatestone.
Sorry I had to torture you guys, but I have to show you guys exactly why Americans are starting to fall for this. Because before I get to this article, I have a guest that will be joining here soon. The propaganda works, my friends. You have Americans, you got these edgelords. I'm going to see if I can find another source too. Americans hate China poll. You have all these edgelords, all these Tucker Carlson style people that are like, man, I question the media, bro. I never believe CNN, bro. I'm a critical thinker, cuz. The New York Times, fake news. But then they believe everything that the New York Times, Washington Post, CNN, MSNBC say about China. Why should we have this rabid hatred for China? Americans can't even tell you. Look at this headline. Americans remain critical of China. Many see China as increasingly influential. Oh my God, how dare they? How dare China be influential? So do you guys oppose them for what? For what I oppose America for? Is there war crimes, genocides, the treatment of the poor? No. We hate China because they're influential. The fuck? They're like, man, and you hear Fox News and you see these right wingers all the time. They say, man, don't you know China? They're being extremely nefarious. They're building relationship with countries in Africa. They're trying to undermine our influence with India. They try to pull our allies away from us. So then they're engaging in diplomacy? You upset that China is using their influence and engaging with diplomacy? Americans remain critical of China. And this is exactly why. They got Americans hating China. They can't even tell you why. So I'm going to play this short clip, and then I see my guest Alex here. Alex Vitale, I will introduce you here very soon, here in a few minutes. I appreciate you for joining us. I'm going to play just a little bit. I don't plan on watching it all. This is only 4 minutes. We only got to watch about half of it. I'm going to show you guys why the American people have been randomly programmed to hate China. You have boomers. You got these white boomers watching Fox News just fucking see the goddamn Xi Jinping, goddamn Chinese Communist Party. This is why.
Joining us now is Gatestone Institute Senior Fellow. He's author of the upcoming book, Plan Red, China's Project to Destroy America. Gordon.
There's a reason why they never show you guys any speeches of Xi Jinping and Putin. When you hear speeches for Xi Jinping, which I read a lot, I watch a lot, what Xi consistently talks about is peace. How we can build peace and coexistence with other countries. Meanwhile, in America, they bring Gordon Chang on because apparently there are no other experts on China in the world other than Gordon Chang. You guys know I'm a nerd. I have almost like a fucking bad habit of watching these propaganda videos. And when you watch enough of these, like my nerdy ass do, you will start seeing patterns. Like Gordon Chang is the guy they bring on, not only on Fox News, but all over corporate media. Like 9 out of 10 times, you have this psychopath that's essentially trying to explain why we should go to war with China. But let's continue. We're only going to watch a little bit of it, and then we move on with our next segment with Alex Vitale.
Chang back with us. And Gordon, you've got a warning about this as well, about these devices and how Israel was able to infiltrate the supply chain to get back at Hezbollah. But you think China could do the same thing to anybody, to America?
Yeah, it would be a lot easier for China. Remember, Israel had to infiltrate the supply chain. China doesn't have to.
Bro, if you guys saw my stream yesterday, I literally did this joke. They saw the Israelis engage in mass fucking terrorism, and the reaction of Americans is, what if those damn Chinese do this to us? What about the goddamn Asians? What are we? What are we, filthy Asians? No, fam. This is not something that China would do. This is something the West would do because the West is deeply evil. After seeing Israel engage in one of the most disgusting terrorist acts of our time, they're now trying to get Americans convinced that China would do it. What are we, those filthy Asians? That's the joke, and they literally doing the meme here. Only a little bit left, and then we get our guests in here.
To do that because it is the beginning of the supply chain. They manufacture all of this stuff. So if we're talking about pagers, walkie-talkies, but remember also home solar systems, which means your toaster. You can do all of these devices can be laced with
China is about to blow your toaster up. China is about to blow your toaster up because that's how much they want to see you dead. I think we can end it there. This is, you guys see the insane propaganda that they repeat here to get Americans to hate China, and it works. I want to see if I can find another poll. Oh, here's another one. Record low. Let me take this down. Record low. 15% of Americans view China favorably, and I am honored to say I'm among the 15%. There's nothing wrong with us saying that we are impressed with China's ability to reduce poverty. I see their high-speed rail system, and I wish we had something like that. They rein their landlords in. Landlords only allowed to own 2 properties, not only allowed to rent 1, and they got strict price restrictions, which lead to the average rent being $499. Even in expensive cities, it may go as high as $600 at best. So they provide healthcare to their people while they are building infrastructure for China and forgiving their debts. You goddamn right, I'm impressed with what they're doing. But Americans are trained to hate them. I will never, ever apologize for the fact that I want to see the United States engage and have friendly relationships with Russia and China. You guys don't have to take it as far as I do, but there's nothing wrong with us advocating for peace and coexistence. So I'll end that segment here. We have a fantastic guest. You guys know I co-founded 10 Demands. Police abolition, criminal justice is something that's extremely important to me. It was like how I got started in activism, because I personally view the police in this capitalist structure that we live in as the enforcers of our belligerent capitalist structure. They are an enforcer of mass poverty. So with that said, I think I have someone that can explain and talk about this even more eloquently than I can. We have
that's hard to believe.
We have the author of The End of Policing, Alice Vitale. Am I saying that correctly? Thank you for joining us on RBN.
Yeah.
I appreciate you joining us today. Let's get started with this, because let me pull this receipt up. There's not a lot to talk about this, and we can have a lot of theories of why a lot of people are not talking about this. I think Democrats do a great job luring people to sleep. A lot of people are less critical of what our government is doing when Democrats are there to lure them to sleep. But look, I saw this a while ago. This story in particular was written a month ago. You guys know, after the George Floyd protest, after all the pressure we put, police killing is at an all-time high. It's almost like they're retaliating against us. So I'm very broadly, just to get us warmed up, Alex, I want to get your thoughts on this.
Sure.
Police killing more Americans than ever. Where's the outrage? What are your thoughts, Alex?
So, after really the Ferguson uprising, Obama and others said, no, wait a second, don't worry, we're going to fix policing. Obama created this task force on 21st century policing with all these great ideas to reform the police, with things like implicit bias training and body cameras and new use of force policies written down in the policy book that no one ever looks at, right? And a lot of cities, check, got the body cameras, did the training, changed the policy, and the killings keep going up, right? And of course, the officers involved in killing George Floyd had all these reforms: implicit bias training, de-escalation training, mindfulness training. They were wearing body cameras. They were operating under a new use of force policy. They were operating under a bystander policy that required that officers intervene when they see misconduct by a fellow. None of it made any difference. His life did not matter to them. And their job is to micromanage the lives of people like George Floyd using whatever they feel is necessary. And the system is designed to excuse their violence. And so that's why almost nothing ever happens to these officers who kill people for evading a subway fare or for trying to buy something in a corner store.
Yeah, very well said.
Cigarettes on the sidewalk.
And I want you to explain more in detail about why you personally, and correct me if I'm wrong, I don't want to straw man your argument. Explain to me why you believe that reforms are ineffective.
Yeah.
There's something that I would never forgive the Democrats for doing, because after George Floyd was executed, they then crafted a bill called the George Floyd Act, and then gave the people who killed George Floyd more money. And then to this day, you have the black sellouts, the black congressional caucus, the black liberal sellouts. To this day, they will say, "Oh, Biden passed police reform. He passed the George Floyd Policing Act."
Well,
and
they couldn't even get it passed, though. They couldn't even get it passed, right? So it's just an idea. It's a bill that's out there. It's not been passed. And of course, it would not have saved George Floyd's life. There's nothing in there that would have saved his life. Just like in Memphis, they tried to pass the Tyree Nichols Act, and his family came out and said, there's nothing in here that would have saved my son's life. And in both cases, thankfully, they've been voted down. Unfortunately, mostly with the votes of fascists. So we have that problem, right, in
Yeah.
Congress. So we sometimes have strange bedfellows in this regard. But more importantly, all these reforms, the Obama reforms, the stuff that's in the George Floyd Act, these are what we call procedural reforms. And they're based on the idea that the problem with policing is one of a lack of professionalization and following of the rules properly. And if we could just give them the right amount of training, equipment, and oversight, then they would pursue enforcement of the law in the right way, and then the public would trust them and cooperate with them. It's almost like it's our fault that we don't trust the police, that, you know, and that the legitimacy problem is or some sort of misunderstanding that can be corrected with a few hours of training. And so what these bills don't do is ask why we're using police to micromanage the lives of the poor in every aspect of their life.
Exactly.
Why are we filling inner city schools with armed police officers? Why, when a mom who can't afford expensive health insurance for her kid calls the police for help in a mental health crisis, and we calls 911 for help, and we send people with guns to provide mental health? Like, why do we do that? Why is our primary tool for managing mass homelessness sending the police, breaking up encampments, you know? So the Justice for George Floyd Act, there's no justice in it. There's apologetics and resources for policing. It's just a continuation of a kind of propaganda that got us in this mess in the first place.
Yeah, very well said. And the Democrats are running, because I'm glad you bring up the fact that it didn't pass. I didn't really follow it down the pipeline, but it didn't pass. And Democrats are running on that to this day. To this day, I saw, it wasn't a segment worth covering, but I saw Jasmine Crockett on MSNBC like, hey, don't worry, guys. Kamala supports the George Floyd Policing Act. And you guys see how disgusting it is. And if you're non-political, like if you someone like many people in my family, they'll hear George Floyd Policing Act. God, oh, that sounds great. They actually they honoring the George Floyd's life, but it actually enables the police state and doesn't solve the problem. Which go to my next question. I want to ask you about what I just mentioned, propaganda, and how the media plays a role in shaping the American false consciousness that the police somehow prevents crime, that the police are somehow here to protect us. I want to get your general thoughts on the effectiveness of propaganda, Alex.
Well, I think it's very effective. I mean, we've all grown up with it. It's really shaped people's perceptions, especially those who aren't really the object of everyday policing in particular. But even in heavily policed communities, our views about policing are heavily shaped by the dramas that we watch on TV and also the news coverage, all of which is designed to legitimate the use of policing as a primary tool for managing our social problems of all stripes. So, you know, I grew up in the era of Adam 12 and the Mod Squad and these shows of the late 60s and early 70s that were really in many ways created with police departments in the wake of first the Watts riots and then the uprisings throughout the late 60s and early 70s. These shows were created often in partnership with police departments to try to change people's perception of what policing is. You know, that we're just here to enforce the law, we're professionals, we're doing it in a neutral, non-racist fashion. And so just completely sort of misrepresenting the facts on the ground in order to try to reestablish public trust in the police.
Something that I never understood that many people on the left would run away from, and I want to get your honest thoughts on this. I never understood why people ran away from the fiscal argument against the police, because the NYPD alone spends 3 times more than North Korea's military budget. You know, the country that we call militaristic, they're evil. Look how militaristic North Korea is. We spend 3 times more than them.
Yeah, we're up to $1 billion just in overtime spending this year from the NYPD. And that's after our city council told us they were, going to put a lid on overtime. But in fact, whatever they spend, the city just backs them on it. So whatever's in the official budget turns out to be largely irrelevant. That's just a fantasy number. And the amount spent is the amount spent, and they just spend what they want to spend. And there's always a justification. And if you try to cut them back, then they say, oh, well, you're in bed with the terrorists, you're in bed with the criminals, and you're trying to destroy society. I mean, they literally use language like that, especially the unions. And so there's tremendous political pressure to just keep pouring money into an institution that is just notoriously ineffective, corrupt, and dangerous to the American people. So it is a financial argument, of course, but it's a bigger argument than just that, right? There's more than at stake than just the dollars in the budget. There's the way in which turning our social problems into problems of crime to be managed by police excuses all the market failures, all the failures of the state, all the failures of housing markets, labor markets to provide for people's basic needs. And so it's really appealing for these politicians of both parties to frame their city's problems as ones of crime and disorder to be managed by policing, because that means they don't have to do anything about their downtown real estate deals. They don't have to upset the people who finance their campaigns. They can keep trying to pressure people to go back to working in these downtown office buildings because we cleaned up the streets, so that the banks don't have to take a haircut on these loans that, these buildings are heavily leveraged. And these mayors, are basically working for the banks who want to protect real estate values.
Yeah, very well said. And there's you bring up a very important intellectual and moral point of how the way we spend our money on policing is not only like morally wrong, but it's not even effective in creating public safety. In the idea that you will go towards an authoritarian, violent policy against the people instead of addressing their needs. Think about it, guys. There's no one gang banging in the suburbs. Like if you go to Malibu, no one ain't gang banging out there. Like when you go to wealthy communities, like for example, there's like a clear class divide in Kansas City. I'm sure it's all over the country as well. But when you go to the wealthy, affluent, upper middle class neighborhoods in Kansas City, you're not running to gangbanging. It's when you run into poor, disenfranchised community. Do you guys think that's a coincidence? So shouldn't the answer to that be, if you want to see lower crime, is to address the material conditions of the people instead of whipping them into submission? Alex, I think you want to chime in. Feel free if you want to.
Yeah, I was in Kansas City last year working with Decarcerate KC. And of course, that's exactly the case. You have this highly segregated society with huge levels of racialized inequality that is reinforced. In Kansas City is an interesting case where they don't even have control over the police budget. The state government does. The people of Kansas City have some other ideas about how to produce public safety without mobilizing policing and prisons, and the state government won't let them do it. The same thing has been happening in Memphis, where I've been doing work for a number of years. We had a massive campaign to end pretextual traffic stops because the evidence shows that these stops don't do anything to make us any safer, but they do lead to lots of really bad consequences for the people stopped, including in some cases their death at the hands of police, or in traffic fatalities, the fines and fees, the intimidation, the fear, that the jobs that get lost because you get arrested because you didn't have your driver's license with you, stuff like that. So here we went and we won this campaign at the local level, and the state government stepped in and overturned it and said, we don't care if there's no evidence that it makes people safer. A cop once told me that they like to do this, and so we're going to let them keep doing it.
And you guys know the Supreme Court says that police have no right to defend you, right? And that was feel free to chime in more on that, Alex. Feel free if you want to speak
it's
on
you know, obviously it's a little bit more complicated than that. It just,
I would love to hear a little more.
You can't sue the police for failure to protect you except under very, very narrow circumstances. But what was interesting was the rhetorical sense in which you have the lawyers for city governments saying, no, there's no statutory requirement that police protect people. And of course, police often fail to protect people. And the cases that were litigated are quite horrific. You know, the mom who had an order of protection against her ex-husband has her kids kidnapped by him off the front lawn. And she actually was a civilian employee for the police department. And she begged them. She's like, my husband has my kids. I have an order of protection. He is illegally kidnapping these children. And they said, well, he'll probably just come back around and drop them off. We're kind of busy writing traffic tickets right now. And of course, he murdered the children and then shot at the police station so that they would come out and murder him. And they just, for 12 hours, begged them to enforce this legal order, and they just ignored her. So this idea that they somehow exist to protect us is a gross misreading of the empirical realities.
I want you to respond to the super chat because I saw the story in the news, but I'm going to take this time to do a quick acknowledgement. I want to acknowledge Landrew, show Landrew some love in the chat, so we appreciate your generous donation. Thank you, Landrew. It seems we are our own enemy. What will be the October surprise? Much love to you, Nick. Much love to you. Community and solidarity. Palestine is the new Palestine. Freedom, all in all. Appreciate that, Landrew. And I want to get your thoughts on this. You can speak on this, but I think this story is another example of how the police serve the capitalist class, and they're willing to kill over. I don't know the exact amount. Was it like $240 or something like that? Like over a few dollars. There was one to shoot.
Yeah, less than $3. So you know, we have a massive public transit system here that is about half financed by individual fares. You know, swiping your card to get on the train or the bus. The fare is close to $3. There are some people who are now eligible for half-price fares if they qualify based on a low income, which is great. That's something we fought for. But interestingly, you brought up Kansas City. Public transit is free in Kansas City. So you know how many people get shot for jumping the turnstile in Kansas City? 0, because there's no turnstile to jump. There's no need for police enforcement. The transit system in Kansas City is quite safe. And we had some bus routes here in New York that we made free. And they became the safest bus routes in the city because there's no conflict over the fare. Bus drivers don't get assaulted, asking people to pay the fare and things like that. So anyway, what we've done in New York is that because people can't afford the fare, a lot of people jump the turnstile. This is costing the transit system money. And so they have stepped up enforcement and turned that over primarily to armed police officers. They didn't work to make it free. They didn't expand, turn the half price into free Metro cards. I mean, they still make children pay. Children are not free on the subways here. And a lot of the people jumping are young people who can't afford it. I have a kid who has extracurriculars and stuff and does not get any free transit. And, even I've been told that even she jumps the turnstile, which is, I've explained to her, risky behavior, but understandable for a lot of young people. Anyway, there are a lot of ways that we could address this issue without sending people with guns.
Very well said.
But once we start sending people with guns, bad things are going to happen. Mostly just people are going to get tickets. People, and the irony of giving people who are too poor to afford the subway a ticket for $160 that they can't pay, right, is just ridiculous. And also, you know, it can be extremely disrupting to people's lives. What if someone doesn't have the right immigration papers or proof of citizenship on them at the time that they could end up in the deportation system? What, you know, people might get detained and become late for their job, late to pick up their kids. This could lead to further consequences and further criminalization. And ultimately, you know, it can lead to this horrible incident of police who are tracking someone down for jumping the turnstile. And then allegedly this person had a knife on them. And as soon as that happened, police started just wildly shooting in a crowded subway station, hitting one of their fellow officers and bystanders, as well as the person that they were tracking after. And I guess the last point I'll just make is that you mentioned propaganda before, and one of the elements of propaganda is this kind of idea that the police are kind of perfect in the execution of their job. Do you ever see police in a television show shoot innocent bystanders? Never. But it happens all the time. It happens all the time. Do you ever see police in a car chase on TV, you know, force some innocent person off the road into a light post, killing them? No, but this happens all the time. And so we have to constantly challenge this mythos that if we just send the superhero with guns, they're going to fix all our problems for us, when in fact they can make these problems much worse.
Alex, you didn't see Rush Hour? Like you didn't see the buddy cop? Do you know one cop kung fu?
Yeah. Sometimes as an act of comedy, right, you have the cops screw up a little bit, which, you know, has its value, can be somewhat subversive. But really, if we look at the every night TV shows, the CSIs and the Law and Orders and all this, the cops can do no wrong. They have it all figured out.
Yeah, and to your point, I mentioned Rush Hour because they want people to think, and I was, 6 or 7 when Rush Hour came out? I was thinking like, man, that's just cool as hell. They want people to think that cops are these kung fu fighting, villain taking out heroic people. And when you look at the comedy side, they even use comedy as a form of propaganda. Do you guys know the show Brooklyn Nine-Nine?
Yeah.
They had a very hard time. Go ahead, Alex.
Yeah, well, they just constantly, you know, after George Floyd, there was an effort to remake some of these shows to include more of these ideas around police reform and procedural justice. And I was, you know, asked by a TV critic to look at one of these shows, you know, with the Black woman police commander and the community outreach. And I'm like, yeah, this is all just more propaganda to try to get people to trust the police. And it has very little to do with reality.
Don't you know the police chief in Brooklyn Nine-Nine is Black and gay? They always do that too. They got a gay Black guy who's fun-loving. And then in Brooklyn Nine-Nine, I haven't seen it post George Floyd, but that show was so nefarious because they used to make a punchline out of police violence, like all the time. Like it would be like a punchline. Ha, we rough up the suspect. Oh man, he's so silly. Look at him, he's doing it again. He's roughing up. That was like a joke consistently in the show, making light of police violence. Then the George Floyd stuff happened. Like you said, they were like, oh fuck, we can't do that no more. So they would try to change direction. But to be clear, I haven't watched any of that in years. But that's like the subtle, even like they're the complicated propaganda, which you did a great job explaining, but there's even the subtle shit, like even the just making light of any brutality.
All the stuff that tries to pretend to be progressive. I mean, I grew up also watching shows like Barney Miller about a group of detectives, you know, in Manhattan, and it was filled with these kinds of liberal ideals about can't we all just get along, and if we just understood each other better, you know, things. But again, this had nothing to do with the real world of policing. This was all just a fantasy that helped us to think, oh no, the police, they're really trying to figure it out. No, I mean, if we look at what was actually going on, if you wanted to know what was actually going on, talk to Frank Serpico, who was a cop during that period, who said, the whole purpose of policing was to extract bribes during those years. And public safety was very far down the list of priorities.
Yeah, this is the last little segment we're gonna do, and we can wrap up because we can do a whole show on the history of policing alone.
Well, I talk all day about this.
But for the last part, because we did a lot of discussion over the class elements, was extremely important, but it's very important, especially when we talk about police and talk about how police exist to serve white supremacy. It's an expansion of Jim Crow era laws. You had lynching where black men was lynched, thousands of families destroyed because black men were executed by white domestic terrorists. And then after the civil rights movement, they made a tactical change, and many people are very open about it. Like, instead of having open lynching, we're gonna have the death penalty, and we're gonna execute black men using law enforcement. So they greatly expanded the police force in the 70s, even more in the 80s. And I have a quick question for you guys. Where do you guys think all the Klan members went? Where do you guys think all the white supremacists went? They went to policing. Yeah. Where do you guys think their wives went? They went into nursing and teaching. Now, I know you got a lot to say, but just for a second, I'm going to show you guys this video. And this video is very fucking sad. This is very intense and very triggering. I'll just let you guys know that right now. I love the caption to this video. Fuck the Diddy situation. Everyone talking about P. Diddy right now. But this story should be way bigger. And I think this ties into what I was just talking about, the role of police as hitmen. Now, I don't want to spoil it. I want to play the video. And I know you got a lot to chime in on. So after the video is over, I'll pass it to you.
Document contains descriptions and images of police violence. We turn now to Mississippi, where 6 white former police officers who called themselves the Goon Squad have pleaded guilty to raiding a home and torturing 2 black men earlier this year, after first trying to cover up their actions. Some of the officers face life in prison. On January 24th, court records show the deputies raided a home in Braxton, Mississippi, after a white neighbor of one of the officers called them to complain there were black men staying there. The officer texted the others, quote, "Are y'all available for a mission?" That night, without a warrant, the officers burst into the home, handcuffed, beat, tasered the 2 men, Michael Corey Jenkins and Eddie Terrell Parker. Also sexually abused them with a sex toy with shouting racial slurs. One of the officers put a gun in Jenkins' mouth for a mock execution and pulled the trigger. The bullet lacerated Jenkins' tongue, broke his jaw, exited through his neck. This is U.S. Attorney Darren LaMarca last week announcing federal charges against the former officers for the attack.
But not only did they brazenly commit these acts, but after inflicting serious bodily injury by firing a shot through one of the victim's mouths, they left him lying in a pool of blood. Gathered on the porch of the house to discuss.
I think you guys get it. Alex, I know you have a lot to say, so I just want to get your thoughts. Your mindset.
Yeah, so, there's a long history of law enforcement overlap with white supremacist organizations. The Klan in its various forms over the years, John Birch Society, the Oath Keepers. And we know that some of these groups have had an intentional strategy of trying to infiltrate law enforcement. And in fact, the FBI has active investigations underway because it's become such a widespread problem. I would say that it doesn't, so I was going to talk about that. The reproduction of, white supremacy and racial inequality, though, doesn't require a sort of active racist intent by police officers. You've got this thing about the deputy gangs in LA, but a lot of these deputies are not white. A lot of them are Latino, some are Asian, and they are still meting out this violence on people, mostly other people of color. And so the system of policing, even when it is carried out by Black police chiefs and Latino police officers and people who've had all their anti-bias training, still reproduces white supremacy because of the way it frames the problems of communities of color as crime to be managed by policing.
Absolutely.
Through things like the war on drugs, through the criminalization of homelessness, through the criminalization of mental health crises, etc. And so if we want to avoid white supremacy, we need to get the police out of our lives in every way we can. It's just an inherently harmful institution with close historic ties to white supremacy and the mobilization of violence to reproduce political economic inequality. So why would we want this institution? I just think for folks in Black communities, they're really stuck because they have problems that they need to address, and government has told them that the only tool they can have is policing. And remarkably, a lot of people still won't accept policing, but a lot of people do out of desperation and as a result of a lot of propaganda, etc. And we really need to break that cycle of thinking that police are going to solve our problems in ways that don't make our lives worse. And I would just say, especially for people in the Black community, when have the police ever been a tool for making Black people's lives better? Just the opposite. Just the opposite. So why would we turn to the institution that's been in the center of anti-Black racism throughout most of American history? Why would we turn to that institution to solve our community problems? Almost anything we could come up with would be better than that.
Very well said, Alex. And we definitely got to have you back on again because there's so much to discuss on this issue. I want to pass it to you for anything you want to shout out. Make sure you guys check out Alex Vitale in his book, The End of Policing. Follow him on Twitter as well. I'll pass it to you for any last thoughts. And we got to get out here. It was a great conversation.
Thanks. We're gonna be issuing a report on alternatives to school policing later this fall in LA County, working with the Cancel the Contract campaign. And we're also going to be releasing a film on the decriminalization of sex work as a better strategy than criminalization this fall. So feel free to reach out on social media if you're interested in either of those projects.
Yeah, we would love to have you on to spread awareness about that, promote, and all that stuff, because it's very important work, and I'm glad that you're taking this on. It's an issue that we need to greatly raise awareness on. So make sure you guys check out Alex Vitale. That's it for Nick at Noon for this week. JB Show is on Sunday. I have a hotspot that just came out, so make sure you guys check that out. So I will be back next week. Thank you guys for watching. Take care. Peace out.